Hey, how's it going, everybody? I'm Rollshambo, the connoisseur and collector of all things sharp and shiny. And if you've ever been told that you have too many knives, smash the like button because you, my friend, are in good company. Welcome back to another episode of Grail or Garbage, the series where I systematically and categorically rank and review knives like this Kizer Drop Bear, which was loaned to me for review by a viewer, Andres86. Huge shout out to him for sending this my way so that I could check it out. And in the course of things, answer the tough questions. In the last 2 weeks, I've carried it, I've cut with it, I've held it in my hand, and I've compared it to other knives that I've ranked before. It's time that we find out. Is the Kizer Drop Bear a grail? Or is it garbage? All right, everybody, so let's go ahead and jump right into it. If you're new to Grail or Garbage, here's how the ranking works. We have 5 categories, and I will go ahead and pop the leaderboard up on the screen. The 5 categories are materials, ergonomics, fidget factor, the lock, and of course, fit and finish. With those 5 categories, you can get a max of 10 points in each with a max total overall score of 50. Nothing has ever gotten a 50. I don't know if anything ever will. That is a pocket knife that most likely does not exist. So if you get a score of 21 to 30, it's a low recommend. 31 to 40 is a high recommend. And a total overall score of 41 to 50 would be a grail. We only have one so far. And as you can tell, as of this moment, the only grail that's been ranked in this channel is the Grant Gripper. So let's go ahead and start off with the first category, which is materials. Now, materials is heavily weighed against the cost. The cost of this is going to come in right around $115. If that's changed since the last time I checked, I'll go ahead and put it up on the screen. And I'll also link this knife down below if you decide that you want to buy it. So for materials, we're looking at 154 cm, which is a very nice rounded steel as far as composition is concerned. It takes a great edge, decent edge retention. It's very, very corrosion resistant, and it's not too difficult to sharpen, all while keeping a pretty decent toughness. As for the handle scales, it's got these beautiful matte finished aluminum handle scales, stamped steel pocket clip, and of course steel liners with these barrel spacers. Now, you know, I'm not a huge fan of barrel spacers, but it does make it easier to clean out the inside of the knife. So for those of you who care about that, barrel spacers are nice and it does work well. While these materials aren't necessarily anything to write home about, they are decent materials. This is a very excellent iteration of aluminum, and the way that it's done is just perfect. These aluminum matte handle scales are so very comfortable, but that's the next category. As far as materials are concerned, I feel very confident in giving this a 7 out of 10. Moving on to the next category, we have ergonomics. How does it feel in the hand? Does it feel comfortable? Is there good spots to get extra leverage? Does it make sense? Is it too long? Is it too short? Yes, size matters. And to answer those questions, it's very comfortable. The matte finish is almost, it feels plush. I don't know how to explain it. There's really no extra finger choil. There is a sharpening choil. Personally, I would have liked to have seen them cut out this spot right here so you could get an even more choked up grip, because when you look at the spine of the blade, that jimping actually goes extremely far, all the way to the swedge near the front of the blade. And that means that you can put your thumb way up there. And it would have been nice if we could have, you know, really put our index finger up here at the top. So personally, I would have liked to have seen a finger cut out there, because I think that would have made a whole lot of sense. It may not have looked the best with these candy bar style handle scales, but aside from that, the overall feel is really good, and I don't really have anything to complain about on that. There are no hot spots, despite the fact that I do not like this pocket clip. And I'm going to say this, like, I just don't like stamped pocket clips that go plateau, dip, and then do a plateau. It doesn't have any issue fitting in my pocket per se, but it sticks out in my hand more than I would like. And it's not really something that you notice a whole lot, but you do notice it, and it doesn't necessarily add to an aesthetic at all. I would have liked to have seen a aluminum pocket clip to kind of continue that aluminum design. And I think that if they had done a matte black aluminum pocket clip, more in the candy bar style, I guess you could say, I think that that would have fit the aesthetic a hell of a lot better. And while it might not have been as cheap to produce, it would have been overall a better pocket clip. If you don't know what I mean when I talk about that pocket clip, make sure to check out my video on the Sencut Saxy, where I ended up putting a Civivi titanium clip on it, and it really helped with the aesthetic and the ergonomics. The ergonomics on here are definitely good enough, and I'd say, in fact, due to the finish and the feel of this aluminum, as well as the jimping on the spine of the blade, it makes a very good EDC carry because it's something that feels familiar, it feels confident in your hand, and it's not trying to do too much. You know, there's not a whole lot that can go wrong with this design. And also, if you did need a bit more handle to hang on to, there we go, you could add a small lanyard. And so for those of you with the gargantuan hands, that extra lanyard would give you something extra for the back of your palm to grip onto. This is going to feel good in just about any way that you can grip it. You know, ice pick, hammer, choked up with the thumb on the back, good leverage there. And so I do feel confident in giving this a 7 out of 10 for ergonomics. Moving on, the next part is fidget factor. Now in fidget factor, we talk about the lock, but the lock is its own category. But the lock is important because it's how you engage and disengage the blade. In this case, it feels kind of like a shark lock on a Demco 8020.5. There we go. Geez. Yeah, it feels very similar to the spring on a Demco AD20.5. You can actuate it with one finger or both fingers. And honestly, I would actually suggest doing it with both fingers because I don't necessarily have a whole lot of faith in Omega springs, which is what this uses. This is called a clutch lock, but it's very similar to a axis lock. Again, we'll get more into the lock itself, but that lock is easy to actuate to disengage and engage the blade. And of course, you got thumb studs here. It's not trying too hard on the thumb studs, but I do think that it was nicely highlighted by them making that thumb stud magenta, purple, violet. I'm not sure what to call it. At the end of the day, it is what it is, and it's a thumb stud. It's a very good iteration of it. There is just not a whole lot to talk about here. The thing that is really the redeeming factor for the Fidget is that it's really easy to actuate. It's easy to reverse flick, it's easy to regular flick, and it's something that doesn't require a whole lot of thought. That's nice. I don't really have anything negative to say about that, and it's something that when I carried this, I noticed that without even thinking about it, I had engaged it and disengaged it several times without even thinking about it, and that's good. That means that the fidget factor is good. I'm not a huge fan of thumb studs. Maybe you are, maybe you aren't. In this case, it's enough for me to give this a 7 out of 10 for fidget factor. Moving on, I did touch on this like I normally do when we talk about the fidget factor, is the lock. This is a clutch lock. For those of you who are uninitiated, it's basically an axis lock. It also works off of an Omega spring. And unlike the axis lock, however, if you take the scale front off, you can actually increase or decrease the tension of that lock bar, which is fantastic because let's say that you don't like where it's at when it comes to you from the factory, you can go ahead and reset that. It also makes it easier to replace. And I believe that when you buy these brand new, they do come with extra Omega springs. Feel free to correct me in the comments section down below if I'm wrong, but I do believe these come with extra Omega springs. So that's nice because the Omega springs have never been necessarily a piece that has been known for its reliability. Yeah. I still like it. I don't think that blows me away in any way or sense of the word, because you can get more Omega springs. If it doesn't come with these, I know for a fact you can get extra Omega springs on the market. And the way that this is adjusted or edited, you know, to make it tighter or less tension or more tension or whatever, it just makes it easier to replace that Omega spring. So that's nice. At the end of the day, there is no extra wiggle. The lockup on it is good. I'm not feeling anything side to side, up and down. There's no pivot lash, which is nice. And there's no double clutch. You release the lock and that falls. It's very smooth, and you can treat this kind of like a button lock. So if you're familiar with, the Civivi Elementum button lock, very similar in that regard. The lock itself, something that has been tried and true. It's called the clutch lock, but in all senses of the word, it is essentially an upgraded axis lock. So if you like that, and most people do, you'll like this. It's not anything groundbreaking other than the fact that they took an existing iteration of a way to lock up your knife and they just made it a little bit more customizable, and that's never a bad thing. I love the fact that they took it the extra distance instead of just using the axis lock and be like,
oh, we're just gonna name it something different without doing anything different to the design.
They actually did change something, and they changed something that makes a difference to people on a personal level. So while I may have given this a 6 out of 10 initially, had they not changed anything on the lock, because they did and they made it more customizable, I'm giving this a 7 out of 10 for the lock. And then finally, everybody, we're on to the very last category. The last category is fit and finish. How well realized is the design from the factory? How well put together is it? Did they come out with something that was a full finished product? At the end of the day, this is kind of a design cue. I'm not the biggest fan of drop points like this. And that's a personal opinion type thing, but it has mostly to do with the fact that this is not necessarily a revolutionary blade shape. Not saying that most are these days, but it does seem a little boring. I felt like this was an opportunity for them to come out with a little extra flair. I would have liked to have seen a reverse Tonso, maybe a Warncliffe, maybe add in an extra way to deploy the blade itself, which would have drastically made a huge difference. Like maybe, not necessarily a flipper tab, but had they put in a fuller, that would have made all the difference in my opinion. A small fuller, I don't know if it was possible, or had they made this a harpoon shaped blade, that would have been pretty sweet as well. If you didn't know what a drop bear is, a drop bear, according to the internet, is a mythical marsupial resembling a koala said to live in the trees and attack people by dropping onto their heads from above. And when you think about the fact that that's a mythical Australian hoax, I felt like the blade kind of let me down in that regard. Because of the name, I would have really thought that ultimately they would have done something a little more crazy. But then again, maybe this is the angry koala of your nightmares. I'm not necessarily sure. I do really appreciate all the work that goes into making these handle scales smooth on all ends and just feel plush. I also like the fact that they put in a colored thumb stud that, for no other reason, there's nothing else on this knife that is colored. You can get it with just a plain black thumb stud. So if you like the knife but you just don't like the thumb stud, good news, you can go ahead and pick one up, plain Jane black. But if you're going to do a purple thumb stud, you might as well make some of the other hardware, that violet color as well, like maybe the pivot or the axis bar or the barrel spacers or the clip. They had an opportunity there to really go ahead and add some extra flair, but they didn't. Some people will enjoy that, some people won't. I'm not really on one either way. I think that it's fine. I think that it is funny that is just randomly a violet magenta thumb stud. I also like the fact that there is a swedge here at the top, or towards the tip of the blade rather. And, I can appreciate that. Because this was loaned to me by a viewer, I can't really talk about the sharpness of the blade because as of right now, it is very sharp. But I don't know if that's because the person that lent this to me knows how to sharpen knives, or if that's just how it came from the factory. So in all fairness, I can't necessarily judge that on the fit and finish. I think that this is a great knife, as is notated by others who have reviewed it. And so for that reason, it is getting a 7 out of 10. So all in all, if you were to go ahead and add up all of the scores, it's 7 across the board, which is definitely higher than average. Essentially, this is definitely a knife that I could recommend to anybody. You're looking at a total overall score of 35. 35 is going to put it right there in the realm of the Spyderco Manix 2, right below the Bestech Nixie, which I think overall is a fair rating. If you disagree with me, go ahead and let me know in the comments section down below. Other than that, if you want to check out this knife, I have linked it in the description below, as well as in the leaderboard. Guys, that's all I've got for you today. If you liked the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, boohoo, there's a button for you too. And if you want to see more just like it, go ahead and subscribe. Other than that, I'll see you on the flip side.